Hello there, welcome to Rimo3, and today we have a very special video podcast combo today. We're talking about the new Rimo3 launch, and as always, I have the lovely Samit Halvadia. How are you doing?
I'm good. I think lovely is a great adjective. So I'm happy about that, especially on a gloomy, rainy day. It brings a little sunshine into my life. So thank you for that, Sage.
Of course, it's exciting. We are breaking down the new release, Danube, and it has a lot of huge features that are setting up things for the future, as well as changing how the Rimo3 pipeline works, right?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we really want to pride ourselves on is as and when we onboard more and more customers, Sage. One of the things that a great mentor of mine told me is that every software is amazing until you get a customer using it. And that's when you find out like where the gaps are and the warts and all of that. And as you know, we've gone GA around Thanksgiving of 2022.
Mm.
So we're about almost a year in to our product release and our generally available product set around Rimo3 and Rimo3 Cloud. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we've gotten is that I love automation and I love the fact that you guys are helping us with some of the challenges that we have with manual, tedious tasks. But what would make it better is that if we can erase even more debt, if we can automate more of the mundane, and if we can provide more insights as and when we're going through this migration from legacy to modern. And that's really one of the big focuses of Danube, which is what can we do to ensure that we're removing as many technical debt-based hurdles as possible so that folks can really understand, number one, where they are today, and then really understand what the level of effort is going to be to get to where they want to be tomorrow. And for us, it's been an eye-opening experience because, while we've all lived in this space for some period of time, understanding how people want to use the software, whether it's a partner or a customer, has been really enlightening with our partner advisory board and customer advisory board to come back and say, wouldn't it be great if you could pick up on a couple of additional things? And the Danube release is a great kind of blend of people using our software and understanding that, hey, we're adding a ton of value, but also there are gaps as there is with any software. So for us, the Danube release is kind of our first iteration of a release that's focused on kind of blending innovation and where we see our vision and future around insights going, and then ultimately customer feedback as well. So it's an incredibly exciting release for me because I'm looking at two different components that are kind of finally coming together to say, how do we blend the innovation and ensure that we are still taking customer feedback on board? So for us, when we start talking about the Danube release, it is based on those two themes, which is what can we do to make our partners and customers more successful? And then what can we do to drive additional innovation so that people and users of our platform are ultimately more successful in their journey to modern?
I think it's super important to see, one, we've got the use case here. We were getting that feedback from customers and partners, and then taking in that feedback and saying, oh, hey, they may have a use case over here. Let's slowly get that information, and then now we can put that into our release. For people that don't know, what is Rimo3? What are some of the features that we started with, and then go into how that's changing in this release?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? So from a baseline perspective, we start thinking about, applications at Rimo3, and we start thinking about the fact that workspace delivery has been a commoditized entity for, let's call it the last almost since 2007, right? Since VDI. And we've been working with, key vendors in the VDI workspace delivery space to help folks get their on-prem, get their legacy, to modern.
Hmm.
So, in the lens of an application perspective, I mean, I think my T-shirt might say it best, but ultimately, kind of what we want to do, Sage, is we want to automate a huge amount of the upfront journey where we can take a data-driven approach, an automation-driven approach to helping you understand where you are.
Hmm.
So, what that really means in tech speak is, can we take a look at your existing application estate in SCCM? Can we look at all that 25 years worth of debt that you've accumulated and then help you understand what can be moved to modern, right? By automating the import, by automating the discovery of those artifacts that currently exist, we can understand, okay, this is what those applications are meant to do. This is how they're meant to behave. And this is how we want them to behave. And ultimately, for us, is once we understand that baseline of the import and the discovery and the intelligent smoke test initially, it's then once we've onboarded these applications that we can help customers decide, well, I have these 17 different ways I want to deploy the apps. Some will
Hmm.
be AVD, some will be Windows 365, some is just Windows 11, some is I want to move to MSIX, some is I want to move to Intune. Regardless of what that migration looks like, we want to be able to tell you, will your application function and behave as expected prior to deploying your transformation to modern, right?
Hmm.
And I think that from our perspective, it's been really great starting to see people start that digital transformation journey. But we've also started getting customers that have leveraged us on their journey to modern and are now using us in a management capacity, not just a transformation planning perspective, but also legacy IT operations around patch management, change control, release impact analysis. If I deploy a new version of Windows or a new version of an application, or I change my gold image, or I harden my security so I can minimize my surface area for attacks, now being able to understand the impact of what deploying that change looks like for my users and for my IT admins, we really want to take that to the next level where we can say, ultimately, now prior to deployment, I can understand the impact of any change to your Windows experience, whether it's transformation and migration based, or whether it's post migration and focused on management and ultimately change management as we start kind of moving forward, so that we can take that data driven approach, the automation driven approach to deploying patches, to deploying new versions of the applications. And
Hmm.
Danube is really the first step in helping us kind of tie that vision together.
Oh, definitely. There's a lot of really fun things that are getting in this launch or setting up the foundation with this release, too. We've been talking
Yeah.
about a lot of the different pieces with the new pipeline process, where now you can do individual processes rather than having to go through the entire pipeline. The entire pipeline's still there. But now, if you want to just test, or if you just want to package, or if you just want to see this one thing, you can now do that, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, the theme of this release is really around three major things, right? And the first one that you're talking about right now is breaking the onboarding pipeline.
Hmm.
So, in order to do that, right, like you have to think about this concept. When we built Remo3 Cloud, we built it with the guise and the goal of becoming a fully automated migration and management platform, as it pertains to application delivery,
Hmm.
pre-deployment. So what that means is I want to understand where I am today and I want to understand where I want to get to. And one of the things that we've talked about on a lot of these podcasts that we do, whether it's Ron Oglesby from Login VSI, or
Hmm.
whether it's Coop from HP, or even Scott from Microsoft, right? Like the
Yeah.
main thing that we wanted, that we've started seeing is that this application expertise is slowly diminishing as things become more automated, as things become easier. The challenge is that's great for net new applications or things that don't already exist that you need to run your business, that are sitting on an NT box being held together by bubblegum and duct tape, right? Like that's great
It's
if you
okay.
have
I
net
coded
new
a
stuff.
kicking machine. It'll be fine.
But ultimately, for us, breaking apart the pipeline, when we started building Remo as a platform, I wanted it to be a fully automated experience, almost Peloton-esque, right? Like you see
Hmm.
that sitting behind me. But just tell me what you want to do, and I'm going to do the entire thing, which is what you're talking about. I can run a full pipeline across an application, 45 minutes an app, and take you from discovery to delivery. And that's a really valuable thing that a lot of our customers and partners have really enjoyed. But one of the pieces of feedback that we've gotten is I would love to have a checks and balances component where I can stop after I do the import. I want to
Hmm.
understand what's sitting. What are the artifacts inside of SCCM? What is the construct of my application? So one of the things that we've done is we've broken apart the onboarding pipeline, which is we're only able to do that because we've another part of the big release is that we've moved towards a fully API centric mindset where we say, actually, let's let you invoke this through Nerdio Manager for Enterprise.
Hmm.
Let's let you invoke it through Azure Resource Manager, Intune, wherever you want to use it. We want to be able to say, let's take a pause after we do the import. Let's take a pause after we do discovery. Let's take a pause after we do our baselining. And ultimately, what this gives our partners and customers is more flexibility to start taking a more data driven approach so they can start at the planning phase, right? The way that we've initially constructed it, it was about the doing. It was about just getting you from where you are today to where you want to be.
Hmm.
This release with the broken pipeline and the API centric kind of mindset is no, I don't want to just have to do it. I want to be able to give you the data so that you can start planning it, right? If initially I'm able to go into a customer or a partner and say, this is what SCCM looks like, there's 13,000 apps, but really you only want to move 7,500 of them. We now have the capability for you to review that and make those decisions, which for partners like HP and TCS and a lot of our SIs is incredibly valuable because they can start scoping projects. They can start
Hmm.
looking at the data and saying, oh, hi, Mr. Customer. Hi, Mrs. Customer. I know that you have this many applications. This is the construct of your applications, and this is the resourcing and planning necessary for you to do a data driven migration or a data driven change in your change management process, which has been obviously battle tested in our private previews
Hmm.
with our advisory boards. But it's really about not just doing the doing anymore. It's about enabling planning through data as opposed to through emotion or through some crazy kind of let me guess what type of effort it's going to take, right? Like we've seen those statements of works from our SIs and our partners where they're like, I don't know what I don't know. We're
Hmm.
removing the hurdle of I don't know what I don't know. We have data. So now you do know, right? So from
Yeah.
our perspective, the major shift has been enabling partners to stop the pipeline when it makes sense and start taking that data and building bodies of work around it, right? Not just building bodies of work, but building accurate bodies of work based on
Hmm.
effort, based on complexity, based on time frames. And of course, at that point, the customers can start looking at their different options around delivery and saying, I might do three migrations all at the same time because you're automating a big chunk of it, right? So for
Hmm.
us, it's been about not just doing the doing. This is our first opportunity to go back and say, I get it. You might not be ready to do the migration yet, but what you are ready for is understanding the current state of play so that you
Hmm.
can determine your future state of play.
And this is a really important time for something like this, as we saw at VMware Explore, as we're seeing in all of these different events that we've been participating in. This is a hot topic right now of like
Yeah.
applications. We talked about this with Ron Oglesby from Login VSI. We've got all of the big problems that were like big and shiny. And we kind of like swept the applications under the rug. It was like, oh, applications, yeah, they might be over here running on a server that does Windows XP or whatever, but it's just two apps. It's fine. It's okay. But now, like, it's time for something bigger. It's time for something that applications are now a huge holdup when you go to migrate. It's a huge holdup when you go to manage your application estate and you're trying to be either fully cloud or hybrid. This is huge.
It really is. And, when you start thinking about the profiles of people that are doing this work, of course, we've got our SIs and our partners that are doing a lot of the heavy lift for their customers. But one of the interesting things that we've seen, and, luckily I had the opportunity to go to Paris for this MEMS conference, which is Modern Endpoint Management Specialists, right? And, we focused on the EUC because a lot of folks are doing their migrations from on-prem to hybrid or to DaaS. And that's very much a real thing, as we know. But what other people on the endpoint management side, on the physical device side, are going through is very similar, right? Like these digital transformations aren't single threaded anymore. I always tell this story, and people are probably tired of hearing it, but from the App DNA days, it was really, okay, I'm moving from XP to Windows 7. Okay, that's the single threaded migration, which had three components, right? The first one is, hey, do I also want to look at app virtualization and app V? The second is, do I have any deprecated 16-bit components that are no longer supported in Windows 7? And will my things work in a 64-bit environment as well? So look, that's it.
Yeah.
It was single-threaded for all intents and purposes. Now we're dealing with a multi-threaded migration that's now expanding beyond just EUC and endpoint management. We're starting to see those two things kind of converge, where these Citrix VDI specialists and VMware VDI specialists are now being tasked with not just a migration to AVD, Windows 365, app volumes, MSIX, modern formats, but it's also, can I move from Windows 10 to Windows 11? Can I take what I already have and what is transferable, what's not transferable, what is something that I can actually put some effort in to make it transferable?
Yeah.
And you're starting to see desktop admins, system admins, desktop managers, desktop engineers start going through the same type of digital transformation that we've historically seen in the EUC community that's really focused on kind of VDI, DaaS, desktop as a service. So when you start thinking about kind of where we are from this big picture thing, we're starting to touch all the different components of almost every single Windows endpoint under management, right? So we've started seeing, when we initially started, it was just about AVD. It was just about finishing a migration, seeing if I can move to MSIX, seeing if things will work in multi-session, seeing if I can move from on-prem to AVD. But now you're starting to see so much more, because the sheer permutations of how people can deliver their workspace and in correlation how they can deliver their applications has just exponentially increased, right? So without automation, there's really, you can do it. Anything is possible with enough brute force, but the reality is that expertise isn't there, and it's boring, silly work.
Yeah.
Why not let a machine do it?
Yeah. Why would you use that expertise on that specific product? Like you said,
exactly,
a machine could do it. Why not have them do the exciting things using the tools and the experiences that they have to push things forward rather than patching the ship? Like, get machines to patch the ship. Keep on going.
Yeah.
Closing this out, why are we seeing this now? What is the reason for a lot of the shift? And how is, I think, ultimately, we're looking at a broader perspective of ongoing change, management of your application estate, not just migrating, but continuing that process. Because what was the number? Hundreds of Windows updates a year? What was it? Was crazy, that number that came out. So just security patches.
Yeah, it's interesting because migration and management have historically been seen as two separate sets of tooling and two separate groups of expertise. And the reality is a lot of it is converging. And a big part of that is due to Microsoft. I look at this and I think about the context of the way that Microsoft used to be, which was very much use our technology and, we will make you successful. Well, the reality is Microsoft has come to a really kind of non-Microsoft-esque realization, which is we don't have all of the answers. And for the first time ever, at least in my career, right? Um, and in our space, Sage, like Microsoft has been so open to partners helping solve some of these problems. That ecosystem,
Hmm.
whereas Microsoft has always been partner centric. I mean, there's some silly statistic like for every $1 that Microsoft makes, there's $9 being made in the partner ecosystem to enable them to be
Hmm.
successful with their $1 investment. And now what we're starting to see is Microsoft saying, we're really embracing that and saying, we don't have all of the answers, right? Which is a net new position where they're coming in, and even at the senior executive levels, we're starting to see them opening to partners like app volumes potentially
Hmm.
being natively supported with apps on demand inside of Windows 365 being delivered via Intune. 10 years ago, that was not a thing. So I think part of the reason that you're starting to see this scale of transformation and management start happening at the same time is a byproduct of Microsoft enabling it, right? They're saying, it's okay. Yeah, our volume of change, I understand 1,200 updates to Azure and infrastructure every single year. There's, 12 cumulative updates. There's how many 0-day patches that need to go
Hmm.
out, how many Windows feature releases, a brand new version of Windows. This change is happening, and it's happening at a pace that has never been seen in history, right? Which is why there's an exponential number of permutations of how to deliver that workspace, how to configure that workspace, and ultimately how to manage that workspace. And for us, bringing automation to the table around the application discovery, the application testing, and ultimately the application modernization so that we can enable modern delivery has become a really big part of the digital transformation. But as much so on the other side, not that anyone's ever done with their digital transformation. Like I say
Hmm.
at the beginning of a lot of my talks, like who here is done with their EUC modernization project? And everyone's like, are you crazy? It's a constantly rolling ball. It's going to
If I
continue.
finish, I go
Make
right to the next one.
Exactly. So from a management perspective, being able to cope with that, we want to move away from coping with change to embracing that change. And I
Hmm.
think that you're starting to see the same teams that were historically two different independent entities, a transformation and migration entity, and then a legacy operational and ongoing change management entity
Hmm.
become one. Right. People from an SI perspective want to move towards a project driven and Trojan horse their way into a managed service, it's no different because everyone has limited resources. And I think one of the reasons that you're starting to see these teams converge is because the resources are limited and because the partner ecosystem has just had to do more with less. And that's
Hmm.
why tooling like ours and platforms like ours that truly enable automation around the really boring stuff lets them take their few limited smart people and ultimately start doing more strategic work, right? Like
Hmm.
even in Vegas, I talked to Scott Manchester about this, and he's now started opening a lot of his sessions with IT has historically been seen as a cost center. Now, whether or not we can say that IT is moving towards being a profit center or a hub of innovation is up for debate, and that's a philosophical, several Manhattans, several bourbons type of conversation. But the reality is, if you are a cost center in IT, it's because you're stuck with legacy tooling and
Hmm.
legacy processes. If you can bring new tooling, if you can bring automation, if you can bring innovation to your overall transformation and management
Hmm.
processes that exist today, you're now going to be in a position where, at the very least, you'll be seen as a center of innovation, if not a profit center.
Really looking forward to how everyone takes this new launch and gets to get their hands dirty and start playing around with it. If you want the full details, you can go to rimo3.com/feature-releases and you'll get the full release notes. And we also have a new case study to see how a customer uses it. Large steel manufacturer, how they used Rimo3 to move their Project Optimus forward. So definitely check those both out. Samit, As always, glad to have you here and always enjoy the conversation.
I always enjoy the dulcet tones of Sage Goodwin. So at any point, I'm always happy to be on. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I think, when you start thinking about the way that vendors need to start
Mm-hmm.
approaching, um, it has approaching their solutions. One of the great things that has happened as people move towards SaaS is you can't you can't sell shelfware anymore.
Mm,
That's not a thing, right? Like the days of perpetual licensing, for all intents and purposes, they're over, right? Like, yes, you can still sell it, but that's not the right way to do it.
yeah.
And I think that one of the great things, both for customers and partners, is they have a say in the success of how their projects are going. They have a say in the success of how they want to optimize their change management. And for the first time, we're starting to see a lot of these SaaS vendors take that on board and ultimately build solutions and process and update their processes so that it enables the customer to be successful. Which is why this release, I like to call it a partner and customer enablement release, where
Mm,
it's really around being able to say, "I've heard you." I understand that there's a planning phase. You don't just want to go in and do the migration. You want to understand the effort associated with it. And as and when we continue onboarding more and more seats to AVD and modern management planes like Intune, we're going to continue getting this type of feedback. And we want to ensure that we're building the right type of software and we're enabling our partners and customers to ultimately be successful, both on their journey to modern as well as post
mhm.
modernization, where they could focus on driving innovation through automation.